guys, thanks for tuning in to Shutter Magazine this month. My name is Dustin Lucas, and today I want to talk about a technique called focus stacking. Let's start by opening up Photoshop and pulling together our raw files that we shot. And what you're seeing in this image in front of you is comprised of three photographs. I took a photograph at my near point, or in my foreground in the photograph, where you're seeing the word grand at the bottom. And then I took a photograph about halfway into the photo, maybe closer to more of a third than a half. Took a photo about these fountains back into here, and I took a photo about this plane here, focusing on these stairs. And then I took my third exposure and focused on Art Hill, here, the art museum. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a technique to bring all three of these photos together. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by going to File. We're going to go to Auto Matte, and down to an option called Photo Merge. And this is something that normally you would use for like panoramas or stitching together a bunch of photographs you had taken, usually from one single vantage point. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose Collage. And I know in my article I talk about you can use Auto, which works most of the time. I'm just going to go ahead and stick to Collage, and I'm going to make sure to uncheck Blend Images Together. This is a different way to sort of do the focus stacking, but I'm going to use a different program within Photoshop to do it. So I'm going to go ahead and browse my files, and the raw files that I'm going to choose already have XMPs, so I know that these are the raw files that I have sort of cleaned up and edited. So I'm going to select all three of those, and at this point what we're doing is we're clicking OK. So now what it's going to do is it's going to open up all three of those raw files and put them into one image as three separate layers. And the important thing when shooting for these type of photographs is it's really good to have a remote so your camera doesn't shake or move. And it works really well to have sort of some text in the foreground like I do here, and sharp sort of architecture in the background. You're always looking for sort of sharp edges to focus on to make sure that you're grabbing the sharpest parts of the photograph. So what I'm going to do is we're going to zoom in here, and we're going to kind of look at and see how sharp this lettering gets. And as you see how sharp it goes from my closest focus, which was my first photograph, and how soft it is there. And it gets a little bit sharper, definitely gets a little bit sharper. And this is like sort of focusing at my hyperfocal distance is what I talk about. It's at distance, it's twice the distance of what the beginning of my near point is in the image. So if I were wanting to shoot this whole image and say stop down to f/22, which is a common practice, for greater depth of field, I'd be focusing right around the edge of this brick, because I'd be figuring this foreground here, and I'd be looking at my 2/3 behind. And the biggest issue is since I have so many objects close, and these lines are very sharp, it's very obvious when they're soft and when they're not sharp in focus. And something to look at here, you can just see the difference, especially in the you're seeing the image kind of shrink a little bit because my focal point is so close to the lens. And you can just see how soft it is, especially here when focusing all the way back at Art Hill. And Art Hill doesn't change really too much through all the photographs. I mean, it's softer for sure when I'm focusing all the way at the front, but my middle focus is not too much different. You're seeing the movement too in the water, which will get cleaned up at the end. But you're kind of just noticing the different parts of the photograph as I choose near focus, middle focus, excuse me. So we got near focus, middle focus, and then back focus. Those are pretty close to the same. I'd say that it's quite sharp all in here. And actually on my far focus, it looks like it's a little bit crisper in some areas. I think the middle focus is pretty good for this foliage here. What I'm going to do is zoom back out. So now I have these images all sort of set up and aligned. And so what I'm now going to do is I'm going to go up to Edit, and I'm going to go to Auto Blend Layers. And this is the actual technique for stacking images, blending the images together. It's a much different technique. I think it does a much better job by pulling these images together. And I'm going to make sure that I have seamless tones checked. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And it's going to blend the layers based on the content. And then it's going to make actual layer masks for each of the images that should show up. Now this is the probably the most important part. What I've gone through thus far is sort of more robotic and just kind of straightforward tutorial. But what you're going to notice is you're going to notice these different splotches in the water that don't match up. And you're thinking like, well, you could just take a brush and fill in for part of that. Let's see here. Let me go back to my image, go to brush. Let's see here, it's losing. Let's zoom back out. So what you're going to notice is you're going to choose black to mask that out, but then your image goes away because it cuts it out. So you're going to go to a different layer and do sort of the same thing, and you're going to notice that you can't get rid of that splotch there. And that's where sometimes with doing some of this technique, you don't really have the full functionality as you do normally with layer masks, because it kind of cuts some of your image out. So what I like to do is reposition some of the layers and just kind of see what I'm losing. And I don't think it changes too much, just repositioning those. And you can see the difference in the water with some of these spots that pop up. And at this point, what you would need to do is you can go in and you can clone in or brush in. Let's see here. We can kind of see that fix that we can get there just by brushing on with the white, revealing some of this top layer. So it's going to allow some of this water to kind of go back to where it was, fix some of these splotches, little things like that. You really have to watch out on some of these lines that you'll notice. You see I'm kind of straightening them back out and they're kind of becoming sharper. You really have to be careful, because that's where most of your errors will be revealed. Will be in some of these lines, and so we kind of have to clean some of these up. Some of this might require some clone stamping, and that's mostly because how close focused we were with the camera. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, I don't think it's going to let me do too much brush work. Photoshop's acting a little glitchy here. What I want to do is I'm going to look for that, and I'm noticing that it's getting much sharper right there. So I'm going to try and paint into this layer here to move, like sort of push away some of that. Try to get that sharp. And see, as you see, I'm kind of going back and forth between layers, and I'm just painting with the brush. Just to get rid of some of that softness and some of the distorted blending. I mean, Photoshop does a really good job, but it's not perfect by any means, and so you have to go in and sort of fix all those little flaws, and a lot of times it's at the edges, of the image. You see my image starts to disappear if I get too crazy. So a lot of times what I do is I go between, kind of just go between the layers, and I switch the brush. I'll have to go back in and fix some areas where it's starting to reveal itself again. And just going in and just finding where some of those sharp points are. And so it just kind of becomes difficult. Sometimes you have to really work with the image to get. Let me go a little bit harder. You really have to kind of work with the image to get some of the areas back to where they're kind of supposed to be. As you can see how distorted that got very quickly. Shrink my brush down just so I can see it very quickly. Kind of runs away from me. I'm not going to get too. I'm not going to go too into depth into sort of fixing these areas. I mean, this just requires a little finesse on your part and some patience for sure, in fixing some of those areas. But what you're looking to accomplish is you're wanting to get this sharp. Your first shot, which was at sharp foreground focus, all the way to the bottom of the lens. I mean, you're gonna have a little bit of distortion, which will crop out. I can't help that with the lens. Um, and you're looking all the way up to Art Hill, and it kind of has a almost like a hyper real photographic look to it, with how sharp everything is. And sort of my end product, when I'm all done sort of cleaning up, and I'm kind of with my stitched image, then I start to sort of really polish it up and finish my image. So I start to take it, start to flip things around, start to take it more to that, almost that signature edit look, and really bring in a lot of detail, and really bring in a lot of drama into this photograph. And so that this sort of ends my tutorial. But I think that the focus stacking is definitely a really big step for me in order to get this image where I want it. And this is sort of the level where I'll take it to, bringing lights in, really paying attention to detail. And that focus stacking it gets me a really sharp image, from near point to far point in the focus. And I think that's the most important part of this tutorial. And then the rest after that is just sort of up to my imagination and how far I want to push the image. So if you guys have any questions, or anything that you want to add to this, or any other concerns, just let me know on the website. And I look forward to seeing what you guys come up with. Just let me know. Thanks.